The transport ship Stellar Dawn hummed through hyperspace, carrying its cargo of prisoners toward the Kepler mining colony. In the detention bay, alien guards from 3 different species watched over their human captives with a mixture of boredom and disgust. The Zephyrians, tall and blue-skinned, considered themselves the most civilized. The shorter reptilian Vorthak believed in order through strength. The insectoid Klaxons simply saw humans as inferior mammals. Another batch of human criminals, clicked Overseer Zethak, his mandibles twitching with amusement. Look at them. So weak, so pathetic. How did this species ever think they could challenge the Galactic Coalition? The human prisoners sat in energy-caged cells, most looking defeated after months of captivity following Earth's surrender. Some were soldiers captured during the final battles. Others were civilians who had resisted the occupation. All wore the same gray prison uniforms and neural-dampening collars that prevented any aggressive thoughts from forming into action. In the corner cell sat a man who looked remarkably ordinary. Average height, brown hair, maybe 40 years old with tired eyes. He didn't speak to the other prisoners, didn't try to rally them with speeches about hope or resistance. He just sat quietly, occasionally glancing at the guards with what seemed like mild curiosity. Guard Captain Veltar, a Zephyrian with ceremonial scars marking his rank, approached the human cell. "You're different from the others," he observed. "No anger, no despair, just nothing. What did you do in your pathetic war, human?" The man looked up slowly. When he spoke, his voice was calm and unremarkable. "I was a soldier." "A soldier?" Veltar laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a storm. "What kind of soldier? Infantry, pilot, communications?" "Just a soldier," the man repeated, then closed his eyes as if to sleep. The Zephyrian's curiosity was piqued. He accessed his datapad and scanned the prisoner manifest. Marcus Chen, captured during the Battle of Proxima Station. No specific unit listed, no rank given. How strange. He turned to his subordinates. Usually humans boast about their military service, even in defeat. This one seems different. Across the detention bay, another human prisoner, a former lieutenant named Sarah Webb, had been listening. She recognized something in the quiet man's posture, the way he carried himself even in captivity. There was a stillness about him that reminded her of dangerous animals in zoos, contained but not conquered. The days passed slowly aboard the transport. The guards entertained themselves by taunting the prisoners, describing the harsh conditions awaiting them on Kepler. The mining colony was notorious throughout the galaxy as a place where prisoners were worked to death, extracting rare minerals in toxic environments. Humans last an average of 8 months on Kepler. Overseer Zithak informed them during one of his daily speeches. "The atmosphere burns your lungs, the gravity crushes your bones, and the work never stops. But you should feel honored. Your deaths will contribute to the glory of the Coalition." Most prisoners reacted with fear or anger. Some wept. Others cursed their captors in various human languages. The quiet man, Marcus, simply listened without expression. On the 3rd day, young Private Torres, barely 19 and captured during his first battle, couldn't contain his desperation anymore. "How can you just sit there?" he demanded of Marcus. "Don't you care that we're all going to die in those mines?" Marcus opened his eyes and studied the young soldier. "What would you like me to do?"
"Fight, resist."
"Anything." Torres gestured wildly at their energy barriers. "You're supposed to be a soldier." "I am a soldier," Marcus replied quietly. "And right now a soldier waits. Waits for what?" "For the right moment." Lieutenant Webb found herself paying closer attention to this exchange. Something in Marcus's tone suggested he wasn't just talking about accepting their fate. There was a patience in his voice that spoke of experience, of having waited before and knowing when waiting ends. The Klaxon guards found this conversation amusing. "Listen to the mammals debate," one buzzed to another, "as if they have any choice in their destiny." That night, during the ship's rest cycle when the lights dimmed, Webb managed to whisper across the narrow space between cells. "I know that look, soldier. I've seen it before in special operations personnel. What unit were you really with?" Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he hadn't heard. Then barely audible, "Classified." "The war's over," she pressed. "Earth surrendered. What does classification matter now?" "It matters because some classifications outlast wars," he replied. "Some things stay buried until they need to come out." The next morning brought unexpected excitement. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship, and the guards rushed to their emergency stations. Through the limited viewport in their detention bay, the prisoners could see flashes of weapons fire in the distance. "What's happening?" Torres asked frantically. Captain Veltar's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "All hands to battle stations. We're under attack by human resistance fighters. Repeat, we are under attack." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Here they were, human prisoners being attacked by human resistance fighters who probably didn't even know they were aboard. The prisoners watched helplessly as the battle raged outside their cells. The ship shuddered under weapons fire. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red. Some energy barriers flickered as power was diverted to shields and weapons systems. That's when Marcus stood up for the first time since boarding. "Now," he said simply. Webb saw him move with sudden purpose to the wall of his cell. His fingers found what looked like a perfectly ordinary section of the energy barrier control panel. But when he touched it, something unexpected happened. The barrier flickered not from power loss, but from some kind of override signal. "How did you?" Torres started to ask. "Coalition energy barriers have a manufacturer's override code," Marcus explained calmly as he stepped out of his cell. "Most people don't know it because most people never needed to." He moved quickly but quietly to the guard station, which had been abandoned when the skeleton crew rushed to help with the battle. His fingers danced over the controls with the confidence of someone who had operated this exact equipment before. One by one, the cell barriers deactivated. As the other prisoners stared in shock, Lieutenant Webb began to understand. "You're not just any soldier, are you?" Marcus looked at her with those tired eyes, and for the first time she saw something else behind them. Something cold and patient and very, very dangerous. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not." The ship continued to shake under weapons fire as Marcus moved through the detention bay with purposeful efficiency. The other freed prisoners stood uncertainly by their open cells, unsure what to do next. Outside, the battle between the resistance fighters and the transport's escort ships painted the viewport with flashes of destructive light. "What now?" Lieutenant Webb asked, watching Marcus examine the guard station's weapons locker. "Now we take advantage of a distraction," Marcus replied, his fingers working over the lock mechanism. The sophisticated alien security system should have been impossible for a human to bypass, but somehow his movements were precise and confident. With a soft click, the locker opened. Inside were standard coalition guard weapons, energy rifles, shock batons, and restraint devices. Marcus selected 2 rifles and checked their charge levels with the familiarity of someone who had handled them many times before. Private Torres stepped forward eagerly. "Give me a weapon. I want to fight." Marcus looked at the young soldier with those calm, measuring eyes. "Can you use a Zephyrian pulse rifle?" Well, how hard can it be?" "Hard enough to get yourself and others killed if you don't know what you're doing." Marcus handed one rifle to Webb instead. "Lieutenant, I assume you've had weapons training beyond basic infantry?" Webb nodded, accepting the weapon. She had cross-trained on various coalition equipment during her intelligence officer coursework. "Some. But how do you know these systems so well?" Before Marcus could answer, the ship's internal alarms changed tone. Captain Veltar's voice crackled over the intercom. "Security teams to Detention Bay 7. Prisoner containment breach detected. Time to go," Marcus said simply. He led them out of the detention bay and into the ship's corridors. The Stellar Dawn was a typical coalition transport. Sterile white walls, efficient lighting, and a layout designed for maximum security. But Marcus navigated it like he had the blueprints memorized. "This way," he indicated, turning toward what looked like a maintenance access rather than the main corridors. "How do you know where you're going?" Torres demanded, fear making his voice sharp. "Because I've been on ships like this before," Marcus replied, opening the maintenance hatch with another series of precise commands. They crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel in single file. Behind them, they could hear the heavy footsteps of klaxon guards entering the detention bay, followed by angry clicking and buzzing as they discovered the empty cells. The maintenance tunnel led to an auxiliary corridor that ran parallel to the main passages. Through the walls, they could hear the sounds of the ship's crew rushing to combat stations. The resistance attack was providing perfect cover for their escape. "Where are we heading?" Webb asked quietly. "The communication center," Marcus replied. "If we can access their systems, we can send a message to the resistance fighters. Let them know about the prisoner transport. And how exactly do you plan to access coalition military communications? Marcus glanced back at her. The same way I accessed the cells in the weapons locker. They moved through the ship like ghosts, avoiding the main corridors where crew members rushed back and forth. Marcus seemed to know exactly which routes would be empty, which passages would be monitored, and which systems could be safely bypassed. When they reached the communication center, Marcus studied the door for a moment before placing his hand on the security scanner. The door should have required authorized personnel to open, but it slid aside with a soft hiss. Impossible, Webb whispered. That scanner reads genetic markers and neural patterns. It should only open for coalition crew members. Marcus said nothing, but Torres was staring at him with growing suspicion. Just who are you, really? The communication center was empty. Its usual operators had been called to assist with damage control, as the ship continued to take hits from the resistance attack. Marcus moved to the main console and began typing with the speed and confidence of someone intimately familiar with coalition systems. I'm accessing the ship's database, he explained, his fingers dancing over the alien interface, looking for information about our destination, and he paused, his expression changing slightly. Interesting. What? Webb moved to look over his shoulder. The manifest shows more than just our transport group. There are 3 other prisoner ships in this convoy, all heading to different facilities, plus a coalition command vessel with strategic intelligence. He continued typing, diving deeper into the ship's database. His access permission seemed unlimited, which should have been impossible for any captured human soldier. This attack isn't random, Marcus continued. The Resistance is targeting this convoy specifically. Someone gave them intelligence about what we're carrying. How can you tell? Because they're not trying to destroy us. Look at the weapons fire patterns. They're disabling engines and shields, not going for the reactor. They want to board us. Torres was growing more agitated. You're talking like you're some kind of spy or intelligence officer. But the manifest said you were just regular infantry. Marcus looked at him steadily. Sometimes regular infantry is the best cover. Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered violently and the lights flickered. Through the communication center's small viewport, they could see a resistance fighter ship moving into docking position. They're boarding, Webb observed. Marcus nodded and turned back to the console. Which gives us an opportunity. His fingers flew over the controls, and suddenly the ship's internal communication system activated. His voice echoed through every corridor and compartment of the Stellar Dawn. Attention, Coalition personnel. This is Marcus Chen. I recommend immediate surrender. The response was immediate. Captain Veltar's angry voice crackled back through the speakers. Human prisoner 7749. Return to your cell immediately or face immediate execution. Torres looked confused. Why did you just give away our position? But Webb was beginning to understand. She had seen this kind of tactical thinking before. In classified briefings about special operations. You're not trying to hide from them, she realized. You're trying to get their attention. The captain will send security teams to the communication center, Marcus confirmed. Which means they won't be defending against the boarding parties. As if on cue, they could hear the sound of docking clamps engaging somewhere on the ship's hull. The resistance fighters were coming aboard. Captain Veltar's voice returned to the intercom, but this time there was something different in his tone. Less anger, more concern. Wait, the Zephyrian captain said slowly. Did you say Marcus Chen? Marcus smiled for the first time since they had met him. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I did. There was a long pause. Then Veltar's voice came back, much quieter. Check the restricted database. Search for prisoner Chen Marcus. Authorization code Veltar 77 Alpha. They waited in tense silence. Outside, they could hear the sounds of combat as the resistance fighters engaged with coalition security teams. But inside the communication center, everything was still. Finally, Veltar's voice returned to the intercom. When he spoke, his tone had changed completely. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. All coalition personnel, he announced shipwide. New orders. Do not engage prisoner Chen. Evacuate to emergency pods immediately. Torres looked between Marcus and Webb in confusion. What's happening? Why are they suddenly afraid of you? Marcus was already moving toward the door. Because they just figured out who I really am. And who is that? Marcus paused at the threshold and looked back at them. His ordinary face seemed different now, as if a mask had slipped away to reveal something else underneath. "They used to call me the Reaper," he said quietly. "Before the war ended, I was the Coalition's most wanted human." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Lieutenant Webb felt her breath catch in her throat. Every soldier in the human resistance had heard whispered stories about the Reaper, a ghost who struck at Coalition forces and vanished without a trace. Most believed it was just propaganda, a legend created to boost morale. Private Torres stared at Marcus with wide eyes. "The Reaper? But that's just a story. A myth. Myths don't capture Coalition command ships," Marcus replied calmly, "or destroy entire supply depots, or rescue prisoners from maximum security facilities." Through the ship's hull, they could hear the distinctive sound of energy weapons and the heavy footsteps of armed boarding parties. The resistance fighters were making steady progress through the ship, but they were also taking casualties based on the intensity of the fighting. Marcus moved back to the communication console and began typing rapidly. "I need to contact the boarding party leader. If they don't know I'm here, they might make tactical mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" Webb asked. "The kind that get good people killed when they try to take a ship the hard way instead of the smart way." He activated a secure communication channel. Somehow he knew the resistance encryption codes as well as he knew Coalition systems. "Boarding party leader, this is Reaper. Do you copy?" The response came immediately, a woman's voice crackling with static and excitement. "Reaper? Is that really you? This is Commander Sarah Martinez. We thought you were dead." "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated," Marcus replied. "What's your tactical situation?" "Heavy resistance on decks 3 and 4. They've got defensive positions set up around the main corridors. We're taking casualties trying to break through." Marcus studied the ship's layout on the console display. Negative on the frontal assault. "I can open alternate routes for you. Give me 2 minutes." He turned to Webb and Torres. "We need to move. The Coalition security teams will be repositioning now that they know who I am." "Why would they reposition?" Torres asked as they left the communication center. "Because standard tactics don't work against me," Marcus explained, leading them through another maintenance passage. "They've learned that the hard way." As they moved through the ship's hidden arteries, Webb found herself studying this unremarkable man who had just claimed to be humanity's most legendary operative. The report said the Reaper was responsible for 17 major operations against Coalition forces, single-handedly. 18, Marcus corrected. Intelligence missed one. How is that possible? One person against an entire galactic military? Marcus paused at an intersection of passages, listening carefully before choosing their route. You don't fight an empire by meeting it head-on. You study it, learn its weaknesses, become part of its machinery. Then you turn that machinery against itself. They emerged into a section of the ship Webb didn't recognize, some kind of technical area filled with humming machinery and control systems. Marcus went directly to a specific panel and began working. "Environmental controls," he explained as his fingers moved over the interface. "I'm going to give our resistance friends a little help." He made several adjustments, then activated his communication link again. "Commander Martinez, prepare your teams for environmental shift in 30 seconds. "What kind of shift?" "Gravity reduction in sections 3 and 4, plus emergency lighting protocols." "Your people know zero-G combat?" "Some of them. Good enough. When the gravity cuts go up through the maintenance shafts, the Coalition forces won't expect a vertical assault." Marcus finished his work and turned back to them. "Now we need to reach the detention level. There are other prisoners we need to free." "Other prisoners?" Torres asked. "This transport is carrying more than just us. There are Coalition prisoners too. Political dissidents, captured resistance leaders, people who know things the Coalition once forgotten." They were moving through the ship's service corridors when the gravity suddenly shifted. Through the walls they could hear shouts of confusion from Coalition forces as their defensive positions became useless in the reduced gravity environment. "That should even the odds," Marcus said with satisfaction. They reached the detention level just as the first resistance fighters were breaking through from above. The corridor was a chaos of floating debris and struggling figures as the battle continued in 3 dimensions instead of 2. Marcus moved through the conflict like he belonged there, somehow always in the right place to avoid enemy fire, while positioning himself to help the resistance fighters. Webb watched in amazement as he disabled 3 klaxon guards without seeming to exert any effort. The political prisoners are in the high-security section, he called to Commander Martinez as she touched down. Nearby, Martinez was a tough-looking woman in her 40s, with the kind of scars that spoke of many battles. She looked at Marcus with obvious respect and something that might have been awe. "Reaper, it's good to see you alive. We heard you were captured during the Proxima Station assault." "I let myself be captured," Marcus corrected. "I needed to get inside Coalition transport systems to map their prisoner movement networks." Torres, who had been listening to this exchange, finally exploded. "You let yourself be captured? Do you have any idea what we've been through? The fear, the despair." Marcus looked at him steadily. "Yes, I do. And I'm sorry for that. But sometimes individual suffering serves a larger purpose." "What larger purpose?" "The locations of every Coalition detention facility in this sector. The identities of every political prisoner they're transporting. The security codes for their entire transport network." Marcus gestured around them. "One captured operative just became worth 50 successful raids." Commander Martinez was nodding slowly. "The intelligence you gathered during your captivity, that's how we knew to target this convoy." "Partially. I also left certain information where your intelligence network would find it." Webb was beginning to see the full scope of what Marcus had done. "You've been planning this from the beginning." "The capture, the transport, everything." "Planning is what I do," Marcus replied. "Fighting is just implementation." They had reached the high-security detention area, where energy barriers held a different class of prisoner. These weren't just captured soldiers. These were people the Coalition considered genuinely dangerous. Scientists who had worked on classified human defense projects, resistance leaders who knew too much about Coalition weaknesses, even a few Coalition citizens who had opposed their government's war against humanity. Marcus approached the control systems with the same confident efficiency he had shown everywhere else. But this time something was different. Instead of the quick override he had used before, he paused and entered a much longer sequence of codes. "This section has additional security," he explained. "It's going to take a few minutes to break through." While he worked, the sounds of battle continued around them. The resistance was winning, but the Coalition forces were fighting desperately. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear Captain Veltar trying to coordinate a defense. "All remaining personnel to the command deck," the Zephyrian captain ordered. "Prepare for emergency evacuation protocols." Commander Martinez looked concerned. "They're going to try to destroy the ship rather than let us capture it." Marcus didn't look up from his work. "No, they won't." "How can you be sure?" "Because I disabled their self-destruct system 3 days ago." Torres stared at him. 3 days ago? But you were locked in a cell? The neural dampening collar suppresses aggressive thoughts and actions, Marcus explained patiently. It doesn't affect technical knowledge or the ability to perform maintenance tasks. I volunteered to help repair a malfunctioning power coupling. While I was in the maintenance tunnels, I made certain modifications. Webb shook her head in amazement. You've been sabotaging this ship since the day we boarded. Sabotage is such an ugly word, Marcus said as the high-security barriers finally deactivated. I prefer long-term tactical preparation. The freed political prisoners emerged from their cells looking confused and hopeful. Among them, Webb recognized Dr. Elena Vasquez, a quantum physicist who had disappeared months ago during the Coalition's raid on the Luna Research Facility. Dr. Vasquez, Marcus greeted her. Your research on quantum communication arrays. Do you still remember the encryption algorithms? The scientist nodded slowly. Yes, but how did you... We're going to need that information, Marcus interrupted. The Coalition has been using modified versions of your work to coordinate their occupation forces. If we can reverse engineer the changes, we can intercept and decode their military communications. Commander Martinez was looking at Marcus with new understanding. This wasn't just a rescue mission for you, was it? This was intelligence gathering. Marcus finally turned away from the control console, his ordinary face wearing an expression that was anything but ordinary. Commander, this war didn't end when Earth surrendered. It just changed tactics. The command deck of the Stellar Dawn had become a scene of controlled chaos. Captain Veltar stood at the central command station, his blue-skinned hands moving frantically over the controls as he tried to regain some semblance of control over his ship. Around him, his mixed crew of Zephyrian Vorthak and Klaxon officers worked desperately to coordinate a defense against the resistance borders. "Sir," reported his Vorthak tactical officer, "we've lost contact with security teams on decks 3 through 7. The humans are using the maintenance shafts to bypass our defensive positions." "How?" Veltar demanded. "Those passages require authorization codes and technical knowledge our prisoners shouldn't possess." Before anyone could answer, the main display screen flickered and changed. Instead of tactical readouts, it now showed Marcus Chen standing calmly in what appeared to be the ship's communication center. "Captain Veltar," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the command deck speakers, "I believe we need to talk." The captain's expression shifted from anger to something approaching fear. "How did you access our primary communication systems?" "Those require command-level authorization." "Yes, they do," Marcus agreed. "Would you like to know how long I've had command-level authorization codes for coalition vessels?" Veltar's aide, a young Klaxon officer, looked confused. "Sir, what's he talking about? How could a human prisoner have our authorization codes?" The captain ignored the question, his attention focused entirely on the screen. "What do you want, Reaper?" "I want you to listen carefully," Marcus replied. "Your ship is under my control. Your weapon systems have been disabled. Your engines are operating under my parameters. Your life support is functioning because I allow it to function." "Impossible," the Vorthak tactical officer snarled. "Our systems are protected by quantum encryption. No human technology can break coalition security." Marcus smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several of the bridge crew step back involuntarily. "You're absolutely right. Human technology can't break coalition security, but coalition technology can." The implications of that statement hit Captain Veltar like a physical blow. He sank into his command chair, his blue face pale with understanding. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long what, Captain? How long have you been inside our systems? How long have you had access to coalition technology?" Marcus tilted his head slightly as if considering the question. "Do you remember the Andorian incident 3 years ago? When a coalition research facility suffered a catastrophic system failure, and all their quantum encryption research was destroyed. That was ruled an accident," Veltar said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Was it? What about the Proxima Station data breach? The one where someone downloaded the complete database of coalition prisoner transport schedules?" "That was attributed to a software malfunction. And the Kepler communications array that mysteriously began broadcasting human propaganda across 3 star systems." The captain was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "That was you. All of it. Not just me," Marcus corrected. "But yes, I was involved. You see, Captain, the Coalition made a fundamental error in its approach to conquering humanity. You assumed that because you won the military conflict, you had won the war." On the command deck, the crew was beginning to understand the full scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just a prison transport carrying human criminals. They were carrying one of the most dangerous operatives in the galaxy. The Klaxon aide's mandibles clicked nervously. "Sir, should we activate emergency protocols?" "What emergency protocols?" Veltar asked bitterly. "He just told us he controls our systems. For all we know, he has access to everything." As if to prove the point, the ship's environmental controls shifted slightly. The temperature dropped a few degrees and the lighting dimmed momentarily before returning to normal. "Your aide asks a good question," Marcus said from the screen. "Let me save you some time. Emergency escape pods disabled. Emergency beacon, broadcasting on frequencies I control. Self-destruct mechanism, permanently offline as of 3 days ago. Distress signals, rerouted to resistance monitoring stations." The command deck fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. Every officer present was beginning to realize they were completely helpless. "What do you want?" Captain Veltar asked again. "I want you to understand something important," Marcus replied. "This ship, this convoy, this entire sector of space, it all belongs to the Resistance now. You just haven't realized it yet." Through the viewports, they could see the other ships in their convoy. What had appeared to be a successful defense against a resistance attack was beginning to look very different. The escort vessels were dead in space, their weapons offline. The other prisoner transports were showing signs of similar boarding actions. "You coordinated attacks on the entire convoy," Veltar realized. "I coordinated more than that," Marcus said. "Tell me, Captain, do you know where your supply ships get their navigational data?" The question seemed random. but the captain's expression suggested he was beginning to see a pattern. From Central Command Navigation Authority. And where does Central Command get its quantum encryption updates? From the Secure Communications Division. And who maintains the software for the Secure Communications Division? Veltar was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was hollow. Automated maintenance systems updated remotely from the Technical Research Facility on Andoria, the same facility that suffered that unfortunate accident 3 years ago. The full implications finally hit home. One of the Vorthak officers spoke what everyone was thinking. You've been inside our entire network for 3 years. Not just inside it, Marcus corrected. Controlling it. Every software update, every security patch, every navigational correction. It all passes through systems I have access to. Commander Martinez's voice crackled through the communication system as she joined the conversation from another part of the ship. Reaper, we've secured all sections. The ship is ours. Understood, Commander. Captain Veltar, you and your crew will be transferred to the cargo bay for processing. You'll be treated according to standard prisoner protocols. What happens to us? The captain asked. That depends on how cooperative you decide to be, Marcus replied. The Coalition has information we need. Prisoner transport schedules, facility locations, guard rotations. You can provide that information voluntarily, or we can extract it from your computer systems over time. The Klaxon aide spoke up nervously. The Coalition will never negotiate for our release. They don't negotiate with terrorists. Marcus's expression didn't change, but there was something cold in his eyes. Who said anything about negotiation? And who said anything about terrorism? What do you call this, then? Veltar demanded. War, Marcus said simply. The same war your coalition started when it invaded our worlds and enslaved our people. The only difference is that now we're fighting it properly. The screen flickered and changed to show a tactical display of the local star system. Red markers indicated coalition positions, while blue markers showed resistance forces. What had appeared to be a resistance raid on a single convoy was revealed to be something much larger. 17 coalition facilities in this sector are under simultaneous attack, Marcus explained. Supply depots, communication relays, prisoner transport routes, all using intelligence gathered from operations exactly like this one. Captain Veltar stared at the display in shock. This is impossible. Our intelligence services would have detected preparations for an operation this large. Your intelligence services have been compromised for 2 years, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. Half the reports they file pass through systems under resistance control. We've been feeding your commanders carefully crafted information to position your forces exactly where we wanted them. The command deck was completely silent now. Every officer present was beginning to understand that what they had thought was the end of the human resistance was actually just the beginning of something much more sophisticated and dangerous. You planned all of this, Veltar said, his voice filled with a mixture of admiration and horror. The capture, the transport, the convoy route, everything was designed to get you inside our network. Marcus nodded. Sometimes the best way to destroy a machine is to become part of it first. The screen flickered one more time and went dark, leaving the Coalition crew alone with the realization that their war against humanity had just entered a completely new phase. 3 hours after the Resistance takeover of the Stellar Dawn, Marcus stood in the ship's main cargo bay reviewing intelligence data on a portable display. Around him, the captured Coalition crew sat in energy-contained holding areas, the same type of cells that had previously held the human prisoners. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Commander Martinez approached with a concerned expression. We've finished securing the other ships in the convoy. The intelligence hall is massive, but we have a problem. Marcus looked up from his data review. What kind of problem? Coalition reinforcements. Long-range sensors show a battle group approaching our position. 6 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought. They'll be here in 4 hours. Lieutenant Webb, who had been helping coordinate the resistance fighters, overheard the conversation. Can we jump to hyperspace? Not with these transport ships, Martinez replied. They're designed for cargo hauling, not combat maneuvers. The Coalition will intercept us long before we can reach a safe jump point. Private Torres, still trying to process everything he had learned about Marcus, spoke up from where he was helping organize the freed prisoners. So what do we do? Fight them? Marcus was quiet for a moment. his fingers moving over the display as he studied tactical information. How many ships do we have in this sector? Not nearly enough to face a coalition battle group, Martinez admitted. Maybe 15 fighters and 3 frigates. We're massively outgunned. Numbers aren't everything, Marcus said, still studying his display. Tell me about the coalition's response patterns. When one of their convoys goes missing, what's their standard procedure? Martinez frowned, thinking. They dispatch a search and rescue force to investigate, usually heavily armed in case they're dealing with resistance activity. And what do they expect to find? Either wreckage from an attack or evidence of where the convoy was taken. Marcus nodded slowly, a plan beginning to form in his mind. What they don't expect to find is their convoy exactly where it's supposed to be, operating normally. Webb caught on immediately. You want to impersonate the convoy? More than that, Marcus replied. I want to turn their rescue mission into a trap. He moved to the communication station and began typing rapidly. The coalition battle group is expecting to find destroyed transports and scattered resistance fighters. Instead, they're going to find their convoy in distress, under attack by a much smaller resistance force. But we are a much smaller resistance force, Torres pointed out. Yes, but we're going to look like an even smaller one, Marcus explained. Commander, I need you to take most of your ships and stage a very obvious retreat. Make it look like you're running from the battle group. Martinez looked skeptical. And leave you here with what? A couple of fighters? Leave me here with the convoy and Captain Veltar. The Zephyrian captain, who had been listening from his holding cell, spoke up. What are you planning, Reaper? Marcus walked over to face the captain directly. I'm planning to give you a choice, Veltar. You can cooperate with a deception that might save the lives of your crew, or you can watch them die when that battle group arrives and finds resistance fighters in control of coalition vessels. What kind of deception? You're going to contact the battle group and report that you fought off a resistance attack. Your convoy took damage but is secure. You're requesting immediate assistance with repairs and medical aid for casualties. Veltar stared at him. They'll scan our ships. They'll detect the resistance fighters aboard. Will they? Marcus asked. Or will they detect coalition crew members working to repair battle damage? He gestured to the resistance fighters around the cargo bay. Many of them were already wearing coalition uniforms taken from the captured crew. Your people and mine are more similar than you might think, Captain. Same basic body structure, same life support requirements. With the right uniforms and identity transponders, humans can pass for coalition crew members on a general scan. Identity transponders are keyed to genetic markers, Captain Veltar protested. Your people can't fake those, Marcus smiled. Can't they? Dr. Vasquez, would you care to explain your research into genetic identity manipulation? The quantum physicist stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. During the war, we developed techniques for temporarily altering biological signatures. It was intended for infiltration missions behind coalition lines. Temporarily? Veltar asked. The effects last approximately 6 hours, Dr. Vasquez explained. Long enough for most covert operations. Marcus turned back to the captain. So you see, Captain, when that battle group arrives, they're going to find exactly what they expect. A coalition convoy that fought off a resistance attack and needs assistance. And then what? Veltar demanded. Even if your deception works, you can't fight a battle group with stolen transport ships. I'm not going to fight them, Marcus replied calmly. I'm going to capture them. The cargo bay fell silent. Even Commander Martinez stared at Marcus in disbelief. Capture a battle group? Torres finally managed. That's impossible. You're talking about thousands of coalition military personnel. I'm talking about using their own protocols against them, Marcus corrected. When that battle group arrives to assist a damaged convoy, what's the first thing they'll do? Martinez thought for a moment. Send technical teams and medical personnel to assess the damage and treat casualties. Exactly. And those teams will board our ships to provide assistance. Webb was beginning to understand, where they'll be captured by resistance fighters disguised as coalition crew members. More than that, Marcus continued. The battle group commander will want a full briefing on what happened. He'll expect Captain Veltar to come aboard the flagship to make his report. Captain Veltar's eyes widened as he realized what Marcus was planning. You want me to take you aboard the flagship? As my prisoner, Marcus confirmed. You'll report that you captured a high-value resistance operative during the attack. Someone the Coalition Command will definitely want to interrogate personally. They'll scan you the moment you board, Veltar protested. They'll know immediately who you are. Will they? Remember, Captain, I've had access to Coalition systems for 3 years, including personnel databases and security protocols. As far as their computers are concerned, Marcus Chen is dead, killed during the Battle of Proxima Station. Dr. Vasquez spoke up again. With the genetic alteration techniques, we can make you appear to be any human in their database. Someone unimportant enough not to draw immediate attention. Marcus nodded. Once I'm aboard their flagship with a small team of resistance fighters, we'll have access to their command systems. From there, we can disable their weapons and engines just like we did with this convoy. Commander Martinez shook her head in amazement. You're talking about infiltrating the most secure ship in the battle group and taking control of it from the inside. It's been done before, Marcus replied simply. When? How do you think I got access to Coalition systems in the first place? The implications of that statement hung in the air. Every person in the cargo bay was beginning to realize that Marcus's war against the Coalition had been going on much longer and was far more extensive than anyone had imagined. Captain, Veltar was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. If I cooperate with this plan, what happens to my crew? They'll be treated as prisoners of war, Marcus promised. No executions, no torture, no reprisals. They'll be held in comfortable facilities until the war ends. And if I don't cooperate? Marcus's expression didn't change, but his voice took on a harder edge. Then when that battle group arrives, they'll find their convoy under resistance control. They'll attack to retake it. Your crew will be caught in the crossfire. Veltar looked around at his officers, seeing the fear in their eyes. These weren't hardened military veterans. They were transport crew members who had signed up for what they thought would be safe duty, hauling cargo between Coalition worlds. How do I know? You'll keep your word about treating my crew well? Marcus gestured toward the resistance fighters around the cargo bay. Because these people understand the difference between war and murder, Captain. We're fighting for our freedom, not for revenge. The Zephyrian captain was quiet for another moment, then nodded slowly. I'll do it. But I want your personal guarantee that my crew will be protected. You have it, Marcus replied. Commander Martinez was already moving to prepare for the deception. I'll take the fleet and stage a retreat. How long do you need to prepare? Marcus checked his chronometer. 3 hours should be enough. Dr. Vasquez, how long to prepare the genetic alterations for my team? 2 hours if we start immediately. Do it. Marcus turned back to Captain Veltar. Captain, I suggest you start thinking about exactly what you're going to tell that battle group commander. Remember, the more convincing your performance, the better the chances of keeping your crew alive. As the cargo bay erupted into activity, with resistance fighters changing into Coalition uniforms and Dr. Vasquez preparing her equipment, Private Torres approached Marcus with a question that had been bothering him. How do you do it? Torres asked quietly. How do you stay so calm when you're planning something this impossible? Marcus stood up slowly, the restraints falling away from his wrists with a soft click. They had been unlocked the entire time. The technical teams you sent to inspect the convoy ships, Marcus explained conversationally. They're not coming back. My people have been replacing them one by one as they moved through the vessels. By now, resistance fighters are aboard every ship in your battle group. Admiral Thekvar drew his weapon, but Marcus didn't seem concerned. Admiral, I suggest you consider your next actions very carefully. Your fleet is disabled, your crew is being systematically captured, and you're outnumbered approximately 5,000 to 1. What do you want? What I've always wanted, Marcus replied. To end this war. But to do that, I need access to Coalition Central Command's communication systems, and you, Admiral, are going to provide that access. Captain Veltar, who had been silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Admiral, he keeps his word. He promised my crew would be safe if I cooperated. And they are. Admiral Thekvar looked between the Zephyrian captain and the human operative who had just captured his entire battle group without firing a shot. What kind of access? The kind that will let me send a message to every Coalition world simultaneously, Marcus replied. A message that will offer your government a choice. Negotiate a real peace or watch their entire military network collapse around them. The Admiral stared at him. You're talking about surrender. I'm talking about ending a war that your side can no longer win, Marcus corrected. The question is whether it ends with negotiation or with the complete destruction of coalition military capability. Through the viewport, they could see resistance ships beginning to appear throughout the system, not the small fighter squadrons that had been reported earlier, but a full fleet that had been hiding in the sensor shadows of the gas giants' moons. How long have you been planning this? Admiral Thekvar asked. Marcus looked out at the assembled resistance fleet, then back at the admiral. Since the day Earth surrendered. Your leaders made the mistake of thinking that conquest and victory are the same thing. They're not. He moved to the admiral's communication console and began typing with the same confident efficiency he had shown throughout their entire encounter. Now, Admiral, let's discuss how we're going to contact Coalition Central Command. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood in the observation deck of the neutral space station Haven's Rest, watching as the last Coalition military vessels departed from the Sol system. The peace negotiations had taken longer than expected, but they had succeeded. Earth was free, and the wider human colonies were being granted autonomy under a new interstellar charter. Behind him, the conference room was emptying as diplomats and military representatives from dozens of worlds concluded the final signing ceremony. The war that had begun with humanity's conquest was ending with humanity's recognition as an equal partner in galactic civilization. Commander Martinez approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee, real Earth coffee, not the synthetic substitutes they had lived on during the resistance years. I thought you might want to see this, she said, handing him a datapad along with the coffee. Marcus accepted both gratefully and scanned the document. It was a coalition intelligence report, declassified as part of the peace accords. The subject line read, Assessment of Resistance Operative Reaper Final Analysis. Listen to this, Marcus said, reading aloud with amusement. Subject demonstrates unprecedented ability to infiltrate and manipulate coalition systems. Estimated to have been responsible for 78% of significant resistance victories during the final 2 years of conflict. Recommend immediate capture and interrogation if hostilities resume. Martinez laughed. 78%? That seems low. I was having an off week, Marcus replied with a rare smile. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the ships in the distance. The resistance fleet was dispersing too, with most vessels returning to their homeworlds to help with reconstruction efforts. After years of fighting, peace felt almost surreal. What will you do now? Martinez asked. The provisional government has offered you any position you want. Military command, intelligence directorship, even a cabinet position. Marcus shook his head. I'm not a politician or an administrator. I'm a soldier. And soldiers are most useful during wars, not during peace. There's still a lot of work to do. Reconstruction, establishing new trade relationships, integrating human colonies with coalition worlds. We could use someone with your skills. My skills are finding weaknesses in enemy systems and exploiting them, Marcus replied. Not exactly what you need for building diplomatic relationships. Martinez studied his profile as he gazed out at the departing ships. You know, in all the time I've known you, I've never asked about your life before the war. Were you really military intelligence? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I was a systems analyst for a civilian technology company. We did contract work for various governments, security assessments, network optimization, that sort of thing. A systems analyst became the most feared operative in the galaxy? War has a way of bringing out abilities people didn't know they had, Marcus replied. When the coalition invaded, I realized that all those corporate security systems I had been analyzing were based on the same fundamental principles as military networks. The skills transferred, and the rest? The rest I learned by necessity. When your world is conquered, and your people are enslaved, you become very motivated to understand your enemy's capabilities. Lieutenant Webb appeared in the doorway, now wearing the uniform of the newly established Human Defense Force. Marcus, there's someone here to see you. She stepped aside to reveal Admiral Thekvar, still wearing coalition military dress but with the insignia modified to reflect his new role as a diplomatic liaison. The Vorthak officer looked older than he had during their encounter aboard his flagship, but his bearing remained dignified. Admiral, Marcus greeted him with a slight nod. I wasn't expecting to see you again so soon. I wanted to speak with you before I returned to Coalition space, Thekvar replied. May I join you? Marcus gestured to the seating area near the viewport. Martinez and Webb discreetly withdrew to give them privacy. I've been reading the intelligence reports about your activities during the war, the Admiral began. The scope of what you accomplished is remarkable. I did what needed to be done. You systematically dismantled the most powerful military organization in the galaxy using nothing but patience and intelligence. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or terrified. Marcus considered this. Both reactions are probably appropriate. Admiral Thekvar leaned forward slightly. I have to ask, was everything planned from the beginning? The capture, the transport, even our meeting? Not everything, Marcus admitted. I planned to be captured and transported through Coalition space to gather intelligence. I didn't specifically plan to encounter your battle group, but I had contingencies for various scenarios. Including the scenario where you would capture an entire fleet? Including that one, yes. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. In Coalition military academies, we study famous battles and tactical victories. Your campaign will be taught for generations as an example of asymmetric warfare. I hope it will be taught as an example of why wars should be avoided, Marcus replied. What I did was necessary, but it wasn't something I enjoyed. No, I don't imagine it was. Admiral Thekvar stood up. I wanted you to know that despite everything that happened, I respect what you accomplished. You could have destroyed my fleet, could have killed thousands of Coalition personnel. Instead, you chose a path that minimized casualties on both sides. War should have a purpose beyond causing suffering, Marcus said. My purpose was freedom for my people. Once that was achieved, continuing to fight would have served no one. The Admiral extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. I hope our species can learn to understand each other better in the years to come. Marcus shook his hand. I think they will. The younger generations on both sides seem more interested in building things than destroying them. After Admiral Thekvar left, Marcus returned to the viewport. In the distance, he could see ships from dozens of different worlds working together to establish new trade routes and communication networks. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in years, it was changing for the better. Private Torres, now a sergeant in the Human Defense Force, approached with a formal-looking document. Sir, this just came through from Earth Command. It's your commission in the new military. Marcus accepted the document and scanned it quickly. Full Colonel. With authorization to establish a new intelligence division focused on peaceful cooperation rather than warfare. Congratulations, Colonel Chen, Torres said with genuine admiration. Marcus looked at the commission for a long moment, then carefully folded it and put it in his pocket. Thank you, Sergeant. Though I think I prefer just being called Marcus. Yes, sir. Marcus. Torres paused. Can I ask you something? Of course. During the transport when we first met you, you seemed so ordinary. How did you hide what you really were so completely? Marcus stood up slowly, the restraints falling away from his wrists with a soft click. They had been unlocked the entire time. The technical teams you sent to inspect the convoy ships, Marcus explained conversationally. They're not coming back. My people have been replacing them one by one as they moved through the vessels. By now, resistance fighters are aboard every ship in your battle group. Admiral Thekvar drew his weapon, but Marcus didn't seem concerned. Admiral, I suggest you consider your next actions very carefully. Your fleet is disabled, your crew is being systematically captured, and you're outnumbered approximately 5,000 to 1. What do you want? What I've always wanted, Marcus replied. To end this war. But to do that, I need access to Coalition Central Command's communication systems. And you, Admiral, are going to provide that access. Captain Veltar, who had been silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Admiral, he keeps his word. He promised my crew would be safe if I cooperated. And they are. Admiral Thekvar looked between the Zephyrian captain and the human operative who had just captured his entire battle group without firing a shot. What kind of access? The kind that will let me send a message to every Coalition world simultaneously, Marcus replied. A message that will offer your government a choice. Negotiate a real peace or watch their entire military network collapse around them. The Admiral stared at him. You're talking about surrender. I'm talking about ending a war that your side can no longer win, Marcus corrected. The question is whether it ends with negotiation or with the complete destruction of Coalition military capability. Through the viewport, they could see resistance ships beginning to appear throughout the system, Not the small fighter squadrons that had been reported earlier, but a full fleet that had been hiding in the sensor shadows of the gas giants' moons. "How long have you been planning this?" Admiral Tekvar asked. Marcus looked out at the assembled resistance fleet, then back at the admiral. "Since the day Earth surrendered. Your leaders made the mistake of thinking that conquest and victory are the same thing. They're not." He moved to the admiral's communication console and began typing with the same confident efficiency he had shown throughout their entire encounter. "Now, Admiral, let's discuss how we're going to contact Coalition Central Command." 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood in the observation deck of the neutral space station Haven's Rest, watching as the last Coalition military vessels departed from the Sol system. The peace negotiations had taken longer than expected, but they had succeeded. Earth was free, and the wider human colonies were being granted autonomy under a new interstellar charter. Behind him, the conference room was emptying as diplomats and military representatives from dozens of worlds concluded the final signing ceremony. The war that had begun with humanity's conquest was ending with humanity's recognition as an equal partner in galactic civilization. Commander Martinez approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee, real Earth coffee, not the synthetic substitutes they had lived on during the resistance years. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, handing him a datapad along with the coffee. Marcus accepted both gratefully and scanned the document. It was a Coalition intelligence report, declassified as part of the peace accords. The subject line read, "Assessment of Resistance Operative Reaper, Final Analysis." "Listen to this," Marcus said, reading aloud with amusement. "Subject demonstrates unprecedented ability to infiltrate and manipulate Coalition systems. Estimated to have been responsible for 78% of significant resistance victories during the final 2 years of conflict. Recommend immediate capture and interrogation if hostilities resume." Martinez laughed. 78%? That seems low. "I was having an off week," Marcus replied with a rare smile. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the ships in the distance. The resistance fleet was dispersing too, with most vessels returning to their homeworlds to help with reconstruction efforts. After years of fighting, peace felt almost surreal. "What will you do now?" Martinez asked. "The provisional government has offered you any position you want. Military command, intelligence directorship, even a cabinet position." Marcus shook his head. "I'm not a politician or an administrator. I'm a soldier. And soldiers are most useful during wars, not during peace. There's still a lot of work to do. Reconstruction, establishing new trade relationships, integrating human colonies with Coalition worlds. We could use someone with your skills." "My skills are finding weaknesses in enemy systems and exploiting them," Marcus replied. "Not exactly what you need for building diplomatic relationships." Martinez studied his profile as he gazed out at the departing ships. "You know, in all the time I've known you, I've never asked about your life before the war. Were you really military intelligence?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I was a systems analyst for a civilian technology company. We did contract work for various governments, security assessments, network optimization, that sort of thing. A systems analyst became the most feared operative in the galaxy. War has a way of bringing out abilities people didn't know they had," Marcus replied. "When the Coalition invaded, I realized that all those corporate security systems I had been analyzing were based on the same fundamental principles as military networks. The skills transferred, and the rest I learned by necessity. When your world is conquered and your people are enslaved, you become very motivated to understand your enemy's capabilities." Lieutenant Webb appeared in the doorway, now wearing the uniform of the newly established Human Defense Force. "Marcus, there's someone here to see you." She stepped aside to reveal Admiral Tekvar, still wearing Coalition military dress, but with the insignia modified to reflect his new role as a diplomatic liaison. The Vorthak officer looked older than he had during their encounter aboard his flagship, but his bearing remained dignified. "Admiral," Marcus greeted him with a slight nod. "I wasn't expecting to see you again so soon. I wanted to speak with you before I returned to Coalition space," Tekvar replied. "May I join you?" Marcus gestured to the seating area near the viewport. Martinez and Webb discreetly withdrew to give them privacy. "I've been reading the intelligence reports about your activities during the war," the Admiral began. "The scope of what you accomplished is remarkable. Did what needed to be done. You systematically dismantled the most powerful military organization in the galaxy using nothing but patience and intelligence. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or terrified. Marcus considered this. Both reactions are probably appropriate. Admiral Thekvar leaned forward slightly. I have to ask, was everything planned from the beginning? The capture, the transport, even our meeting? Not everything, Marcus admitted. I planned to be captured and transported through Coalition space to gather intelligence. I didn't specifically plan to encounter your battle group, but I had contingencies for various scenarios. Including the scenario where you would capture an entire fleet? Including that one, yes. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. In Coalition military academies, we study famous battles and tactical victories. Your campaign will be taught for generations as an example of asymmetric warfare. I hope it will be taught as an example of why wars should be avoided, Marcus replied. What I did was necessary, but it wasn't something I enjoyed. No, I don't imagine it was. Admiral Thekvar stood up. I wanted you to know that despite everything that happened, I respect what you accomplished. You could have destroyed my fleet, could have killed thousands of Coalition personnel. Instead, you chose a path that minimized casualties on both sides. War should have a purpose beyond causing suffering, Marcus said. My purpose was freedom for my people. Once that was achieved, continuing to fight would have served no one. The Admiral extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. I hope our species can learn to understand each other better in the years to come. Marcus shook his hand. I think they will. The younger generations on both sides seem more interested in building things than destroying them. After Admiral Thekvar left, Marcus returned to the viewport. In the distance, he could see ships from dozens of different worlds working together to establish new trade routes and communication networks. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in years it was changing for the better. Private Torres, now a sergeant in the Human Defense Force, approached with a formal-looking document. Sir, this just came through from Earth Command. It's your commission in the new military. Marcus accepted the document and scanned it quickly. Full Colonel, with authorization to establish a new intelligence division focused on peaceful cooperation rather than warfare. Congratulations. Colonel Chen, Torres said with genuine admiration. Marcus looked at the commission for a long moment, then carefully folded it and put it in his pocket. Thank you, Sergeant. Though I think I prefer just being called Marcus. Yes, sir. Marcus. Torres paused. Can I ask you something? Of course. During the transport when we first met you, you seemed so ordinary. How did you hide what you really were so completely? Marcus smiled, and Torres realized it was the first completely relaxed expression he had ever seen on the man's face. The most important skill in warfare isn't strength or speed or even intelligence. It's the ability to be underestimated by your enemies. And now I don't need to hide anymore. The war is over, and I can go back to being ordinary. Torres looked skeptical. Do you really think you can just go back to being ordinary after everything you've done? Marcus looked out at the peaceful scene beyond the viewport, where former enemies were working together to build a better future. I think that's exactly what heroes are supposed to do, Sergeant. Save the world, then go home and live quietly. As the sun set through the station's artificial atmosphere, Marcus Chen, former systems analyst, former resistance operative, former legend known as the Reaper, stood watching the ships carry the promise of peace to every corner of the galaxy. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that the war was truly over, and that ordinary people could once again dream of ordinary lives filled with extraordinary possibilities. The Reaper had completed his final mission. Now it was time for Marcus to begin the much more challenging task of learning how to live in the peace he had helped to create.